Welcome to a very special episode of Two Men in a War Game. I'm your host, Kevin.
And I'm the other guy that made it. I'm Paul.
Yeah, it's just going to be Kevin and Paul tonight. Chris couldn't make it. It's all good. We are going to give Chris the space that he needs. He is going to take the night off. We are going to record because I am pumped.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. I've been excited to hear you talk about this for quite a while. But I think everybody's going to enjoy it.
I know we're cagey about what we're going to talk about, and then I always think about the fact that it's right in the description anyway, so it's just fucking dumb. So we're going to talk about Warhammer Underworlds tonight, and I'm a little nervous because like I don't want to fuck this up, right? Because like I just started replaying the game like a month ago. I can tell you exactly how many games I have back in. I have 17 games back in since I started playing the game again, and that's a lot. I guess that is a lot of games.
That's right? A lot of games, 17, sir.
Yeah, 17 is a lot. And 17 is a lot to play in a month too, I suppose.
Yeah.
So,
but it's a quicker game. It's a quicker game.
It is. It can be. But the reason I'm nervous, I don't want to fuck it up, right? Because like I want to make sure, because the game is. It's funny. You look at it on its face, you're like, it's not that complicated a game, but it's actually an incredibly complex game for what it is. You know, that's not to say that it's bad in its complexity. It's just. There's a lot that I could miss or get wrong, and I just don't want to miss anything or get it wrong, so I'm a little nervous. But
you're professional. We're good. You're a professional. Yeah, we believe in you.
I'm professional. Yeah. Okay. But before that, we got to talk about hobby progress. So hobby progress for me, I have painted a full warband for this game, the Headsman's Curse, who are fucking awesome, by the way. If you want,
so good
at the
models.
End of the episode, Paul. If at the end of the episode, I'll go over what they do, so we can actually. I'll probably mention it through the episode as a way to like demonstrate how cool the modern game is. But man, they're cool. But also, I'm painting the Sepulchral Guard, which were actually a series of models that came out in Shadespire. But what happened is they have been releasing new Warhammer Underworlds starter sets that are different from what we'll call the season boxes. Mm-hmm. So the season boxes are the like noun verb, you know what I'm talking about? Like, yeah. This one is Death Gorge.
Right.
And so, or I guess it's like, well, verb noun, adjective noun. Anyway, I guess they change from season to season, but this one is Death Gorge.
Adjective verb?
Adjective noun.
No.
Or whatever. Who knows? We're not smart. We're not here to be smart. And
me fail English? That's impossible.
I don't know. I don't know speech parts. I was in school 30-something years ago. Anyway. They do starter sets too, and the starter sets are cheap. So the starter set that I got at Barnes & Noble was $30. Came with the Sepulchral Guard and some Stormcast warband I don't care about. And the reason this is important is because they come with the new cards that update them and bring them into the sort of modern era of the game, which is really cool. And I always have, the Sepulchral Guard now, they're like 7-year-old models, and I'll still maintain they're some of the best skeleton models that any company has ever done. It's just, we're never questioning Games Workshop's ability to make pretty models. It's kind of, there's a lot of things to question. Making pretty models, not really one of them.
Right.
And they're still great. And the fact that they have good rules now, I started painting them because I like painting skeletons. I know, and I've liked painting skeletons. You know me. I've liked painting skeletons since we met.
I know.
So like, yeah. I mean, vampire counts were my army in Warhammer Fantasy. So I love painting undead. I love painting skeletons. And so I'm painting those now. And so I'm halfway through that warband. I finished the ghosts. They're like Night Haunt models, the Headsman's Curse. Also, I've been really diving into brewing commoner decks for Flesh and Blood. I have found a really cool creative outlet in brewing decks for Commoner. Commoner is a format that only uses common cards, so decks run between $6 and $11. And the restriction of only being able to use common cards, I find that restriction to actually be sort of like really cool way to actually engage my creativity, because you know how it is, right? You put a limitation on something and it kind of actually forces you to be more creative and think a little bit harder. And so I've been going through and trying to brew the best commoner deck I can for every hero and having a lot of fun with that, especially trying to get my local community on board with playing more commoner, because it's an accessible and fun format to play the game. So yeah, those are oh, and one other thing. So I have a 5-year-old daughter. She's 5 now. It was crazy.
Oh my God. Are you kidding me?
I know.
Jeez.
And so she's been taking an interest in me playing Lorcana. So my wife really likes Lorcana. Our older daughter likes Lorcana. Our younger daughter is like, I want to play. And so she's in a point now where she's starting to do sight reading. So she's getting sight words. And so what I did was I used the Lorcana deck builder to narrow down and search for cards that have single keywords. Excuse me. And the reason I did that is because we're using the single keywords as sight words.
Ooh, gotcha.
Right. So I'm calling it low reading Lorcana. And so, because there's a lot of cards with a lot of text, but there's also a lot of cards with zero text to keyword text. So if a card has rush, she can read the word rush as a sight word, and she's 5, she's smart. When I explain what rush means, she knows it. So when she reads rush on a card as a sight word, she knows what that does in the game. And so I've designed decks to teach her how to play Lorcana so that she can play without having to feel overwhelmed by the fact that she can't read the cards that have 2 or 3 sentences on them.
Jeez, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I greatly approve of that.
I'm having a good time with it, but that is my exhaustive hobby progress.
I've been doing a lot too. I have worked on, surprisingly enough, I've been working on a lot of Conquest stuff. I finished my Thunder Riders, which have now been on the table twice.
Sick.
They're scary looking, so people tend to try and take them out, which also then means that everybody else can do what they need to do. So I think that's one of those like fair trades for now, but good Lord, the time I only was able to deliver them for impact attacks, they were devastating. So I can't imagine like when I get like a full round of impact attacks and melee attacks, it's just going to be disgusting. So I finished them. They were a whole lot of fun to paint. The Chieftain resin model is just drop dead, gorgeous, amazing. Well above and beyond anything that, it's just incredible. So I finished up them. I started painting the Drum Beast. So I am in the middle of painting the big old Brontosaurus, which I'm extremely excited about. And, all of my dinosaurs are bird themed. And this one is a flamingo, since it's got the long neck and his legs kind of coming up. So I'm super excited about that because, we're both flamingo lovers.
We are.
So I'm super stoked about it. I mean, I was worried though when I picked it that it was going to be too much, right? Because the way I'm painting them, they're definitely like everybody's like a kind of muted color. So I was afraid the pink was going to come out too bright, but it didn't. It came out perfect.
Oh, it came out perfect. Yeah, it looks really good.
It fits everybody.
Are so striking.
The only thing that I'm really struggling with the underside. And I feel like I didn't quite get it. I didn't quite get it on the T-Rex or the Thunder Riders, and I'm doing something wrong, or at least something that I'm doing is not working. So I have some ideas on what I can do, because it's the belly, so it tends to be, a lighter color. And I'm just trying to get the Army Painter paints that are the lighter colors. I'm just trying to be happy with the contrast, and I haven't quite gotten there yet.
All right.
So, but I have some ideas that I'm going to try, and if you have any ideas. I have faith.
I've been exactly there before, and like one of the cool things about painting is you sort of like try things until something works, and then something works, and we paint in such thin layers that we're not really punished for the things that we do, right?
Yep. Yep. Which is perfectly fine. You know, it looks fine. And I mean the main difference why I'm you know a little more willing to go back and mess with it on this model versus the Triceratops or the Apex Predator, because you know it's the front of the guy's neck and it's a fucking brontosaurus, so everybody's going to be seeing his neck. So I don't need like splotchy spots or just for all of it to look, you know, a single color. So I think what I'm actually going to try and do, Chops, is I'm going to try and use the mixing medium, and I'm going to thin down the color that I used on the rest of it. So this way that fills in anything that is recessed. Because I feel like when I feel like the lighter colors don't hit the recesses as well. So I feel like if I go through that with a thinned down version of the darker color, it'll just sit in the recesses, and then I can come back over it with the lighter color, and that should, I think that'll work. So we'll see. I'll let you know.
All right. It sounds like it'll work. Sounds like a good plan.
In theory, on paper, it sounds like it should work. So like I said, I'll let you know, and I'll update everybody else the next time. So I did that. Oh, and I have a friend who you know I love gaming with, and he, you know, it's just been going through some shit lately, and I could tell that, you know, he just doesn't have the motivation to build and whatnot. So I was like, look, dude, you know, like I'll gladly put all your stuff together. That's fine. Like I'll do it. I'd rather put the time in and get to play with you instead of you being like frustrated that your shit's not built and not coming out. Yeah. So I started building them for him, and then I got the wild hair and decided I was going to start painting some dwarves, and it's been wonderful because it's such a different approach than what I'm doing with my Wadroon. So it's been a good break. It's been it's a challenge because it's so different. There's a lot more metals, and my friend is very big into turbo dork paints.
All right.
So I'm getting to play around with them, which is great, and I kind of had a reel him in a little bit because he was like, just slap the turbo dork on there. I was like, no. I was like, no. I was like, seriously, that's got to be like the highlight, not the you know, main thing. So I think after I painted a dwarf or two, I think he was on board. And I painted most of his Helldrake. And that thing came out really well. Not gonna lie.
Sweet. Yeah. I mean, it has looked, everything you've done with those Wadroon, in my opinion, has looked freaking cool. So hell yeah.
I appreciate that. I've been enjoying the shit out of playing them and painting them and everything like that. So yeah, it's the game. I guess just maybe not hobby progress, but the game is like absolutely taking over my brain.
Sure, I know what that's like.
Yeah. So it's kind of in that phase, which I absolutely am loving, to be able to be like, you know, thinking about the game and, you know, thinking like, oh, I wonder if this combination would be interesting, you know, this artifact with this, you know, character or whatever, or even to just, you know, be able to think about a previous game and be like, oh, well, maybe I should have tried this, or you know, just that off table time. But I'm also feel like we're in a point, because everybody that I play with is new to the game, right? Like it's like we all started picking it up about last year at this time, right? And then by the time everybody built their armies, and you know, I was being stubborn about painting them. You know, so we really just kind of been getting ourselves going and trying to squeeze in at game stores on like Warhammer Night or MCP Night, which is now also Lurkana and D&D Night. So Wednesday's pretty much crowded. Out. Yeah. So we're hoping the Thursdays will work, and that way then people who might be thinking about the old world can come and see how much better this game looks on the table. You know, so we're all kind of in that same boat of learning, but it feels like our entire community has kind of hit level 2 in the game.
So you're, hell yeah.
Right. So we kind of have all the basics down. We're kind of starting to understand our you know, factions. But what's really starting to happen is the thoughtful positioning is a lot of what's happening, right? Of like,
How
can I get in on that flank? Or, can I get around and behind him if I do this? Or, just the more dynamic gameplay, the other night I had my Raptor Riders going after an objective on turn 1, threw spears at it because they're fast enough to get up there. Did damage to it, and then he brought on the Helldrake right behind him, big giant stompy thing. So I got, shit. And basically my goal was to throw a spear at it because it has 3 health, and you can only do 1 damage to it per action, right? So I'm like, all right, I'm going to hit it with a spear. Next turn, I'm going to hit, because the Raptor Riders can just turn any direction at the beginning or end of their turn, and they can fire out of any arc. So then my plan for turn 2 was just turn them back around the other way, throw spears again, and get out.
All right.
Right, so that would be the second one, and then the next turn, be out of range, and then the next turn, get back into throwing range, kill it, and then whatever happened to them from that point wouldn't matter because they scored me 3 points.
Yeah, they did the thing you needed. That's cool.
So it's like that type of dynamic gameplay, and even with that, my plan didn't work because they freaking fluffed their second shot. So at that point, I'm like, well, I'm not going back in because I can't finish it off. That Drake's going to kill me. But, being able to then use them, I used them to get a flank charge and finish off another unit. And then after that, they were able to do their reform and then charge the Helldrake and tied that up for it. So just that different kind of being able to work through problems. And it feels like everybody in the group is kind of hitting that. So the games are getting really interesting. Like the first couple times we played, they would go like 5 turns, right? Which is like half the game. In turn 1, there's like, a unit on the table. But now they're going like 8, 9 turns. So I think that's the other way you can tell that it's developing, is that we're making strong decisions on both ends of offense and defense. So it's just making all of the games more interesting.
Sweet. That's awesome.
Yeah, it feels good to be settled on a game for now, because we're drifting aimlessly, it felt like, for a while after Wild West Exodus kind of fizzled.
And for me, it's really been since Malifaux. And then it's funny, our MCP scene in town is super, super, super bright right now. But like, I was the hype man for the game right up until the pandemic. So like from, November 2019 or September 2019 or whatever it was that the game launched, all the way through the pandemic starting, I was out grinding demos every week.
Hey, you were.
And then the pandemic hit, and I just never really got it back because I tried so hard, And I really need to re-engage with the local scene, but like the game has just gone so far, and it feels like just a big leap for me to get back in. But anyway, that was a long hobby progress.
Well, can I just comment on that real quick?
Yeah.
I feel like with the way that you can just kind of pick individual models, I don't think you're as out of the loop as you think you might be.
Yeah, that's true.
Because you still have the stuff that you are fairly familiar with to play with. Granted, you're going to see some more things out there, but you'll know yours.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. I mean, I just need to get out there and play. But let's transition.
Yeah, let's get into your
Warhammer Underworlds.
Yeah, that one.
So I do want to confront what I feel like is an elephant in the room, and that's that it's going to be 2 episodes in a row talking about a board game.
Is this a board game?
That's what I want to talk about.
Is it a board game? Is it a card game? Is it a miniatures game?
Miniatures game. Yeah, it's the answer is it's all of them.
Yes.
And the thing that I'll say is that, we call ourselves war gamers, but quote unquote pinky in the air war gamers would be like, excuse me. Right. We're war gamers.
Right.
And they play hex and shit games that are hex based. Right.
Yep.
So I think there is something to be said about hex based games being war games.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, BattleTech's a hex based game.
And it's a war game through and through.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I kind of want to just like throw that out there, that I do feel that this qualifies when we talk about the 2 men in a war game or 3 men in a war game. This is certainly a war game in how it plays. And I just want to throw that out there. And it also occupies the same space as God Tier and Aristea, which are both games that we love and respect.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, it's a board game. Yes, it's a war game. Yes, it's also a card game. In a lot of ways, it's a card game.
Yep.
There's a lot of card play here, and we'll get into it. The other thing I want to talk about is, haven't we talked about this before? Because longtime listeners will know this game was coming out as we sort of started this podcast.
Yep.
Like the two things happened around the same time. And we have indeed talked about this game because I liked it and then bounced off it. For a lot of reasons. I bounced off it for a few reasons. When it first came out, it was actually in the second season, which is Night Vault, that I bounced off of it.
Oh, I got to send that to you.
Oh, Night Vault's really, really cool. But yeah, so a lot of stuff has changed since then. I've talked to our local champion Skylar about it, and it sounds like there was a period, there's a season of the game called Harrow Deep. And Harrow Deep introduced some of the rules changes there were sort of the start of the rules changes that get us to where we are today.
Okay.
And where we are today, the game is much better because these are maybe small-ish mechanical changes, but they make huge, huge impacts on the game. And then there's also one giant change in how the actual formats of the game work. And that is a titanic shift in the way that the game is both released and played. And it was actually that change that convinced me to give the game another try. Okay. And then the mechanical changes that I found after that, I was like, oh, this is really refreshing. And the game is really good now. And so good. So that, obviously I've jumped back. I mean, sort of like toed back in. And then like I dipped my toe, I got in ankle deep, and then I jumped out and went to the 3-meter board.
Oh yeah.
Like that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, no doubt.
I got a little taste and I was like, oh, this is my stuff.
And it happened
so let's
quick.
talk about it.
It happened real quick. You're like, oh, I think I'm going to go try Underworlds. And then you were like, look at all the Underworlds I painted.
Yeah, this game is the shit. So let's talk about the broad strokes. That's our normal thing, right? We get into it. We talk about the broad strokes of the game. So it is a board game, but it's kind of cool because the players collaboratively build the board because each player brings a double-sided hex board, and part of the opening game procedure is that you present your opponent with the side of the board that you want to use, and then one of you aligns the boards, and then the one that doesn't align the boards gets to start placing objectives first, and they get to place more objectives.
That's
so you
right.
roll off. Yeah, you roll off and you decide whether or not you want the orientation of the boards or the objectives to matter more to you. And that will depend on your warband, which one is more important to you. And so that's like, it's funny because like right when you sit down, you do that first roll off, you look and you see what your opponent's warband is. You already are in that strategic thinking. Like, is it more important for me to place the objectives to possibly deny them or to score them for myself? Or to place the boards in a way that I can be either defensive or offensive in the way that I want to.
Right.
And so that carries a lot of weight, that decision. This is a hex-based game, so the board is full of hexes. You play by moving. All the movement, measurement, and line of sight is done via the hexes. So hex-based game. This is an alternating multi-stage turn game. So
no measuring tools.
No measuring tools.
No finickiness. So in theory, well, I guess not even in theory. It's you don't have to worry about mismeasuring. You don't have to worry about am I in or am I out, and taking that time to eye everything up.
This is a highly unambiguous game.
Yeah, no, that's great.
I will say some of the. I mean, there's no good way to talk about GW's maybe rule writing in some places. They could take some notes from Wizards of the Coast or Legend Story Studios or Fantasy Flight. There's like a lot of companies that write rules a little cleaner. But the measuring and all that stuff and really a lot of the timing is completely unambiguous. There's multiple timing charts to go through exactly how and when things happen, and there's really not a lot of questions as far as that's concerned.
Right.
And that's one of the nicest things about the game, actually, is that it is very unambiguous. But you do take alternating turns, and they are multi-stage turns too, because each turn sequence, it's funny when I said there's a timing chart. So your turn sequence starts with a reaction step, and then an inspire step, and then a surge step, and then you have your activation, and then reaction, inspire, surge, and then a power step, and then reaction, inspire, surge. So there's like when I said multi-stage, right? There's a and really what that really feels like in practice. I just said a lot of things, but if you look at a timing chart in a game like MCP, even the combat timing chart is like 20 stages, right? There's like 20 steps to it, but what it really looks like is I roll my dice, you roll your dice, we do some re-rolls, we look, it happens very fast in the moment, right?
Right.
And it's the same thing here. It's just that there are those multi-stage things that happen, and it's important because a lot of the card play happens in that multi-stageness.
Okay.
Because those reaction steps are windows to play cards. The power step is windows to play cards, and we'll talk about that. But it's important to note. And so there's four turns per round and 3 rounds in a game. So what that means is each player gets 12 activations, and that's it.
Right.
It's 12 activate.
You gotta know going into it that you need to maximize all of those activations.
Yes, it's 12 activations and you're done. And that's actually another cool thing about that game. I talked about how in deck building commoner, the restriction breeds creativity. It's a similar thing here, right? Once you realize that you don't really have a lot of time to make decisions, you have to make every one of those activations really count.
Right.
And so that's cool. It's a cool part of the game to me.
Yeah, I always thought that was neat about it, right? Like, like you said, kind of forcing your hand into having to make those decisions, right? And I mean, it makes sense thematically, right? Because if you're raiding a tomb or whatever they're searching for, they're going to be in there like trying to get in and out, and somebody else is fucking with them. So that's all gonna happen. I kind of look at this game as like, the heist in Andor. You know what I mean? Sure. That's kind of how I've always viewed it, as everybody's going in, getting their objectives, and getting out.
Yep. So that's it, right? Again, 4 turns, 3 rounds, game over. Whoever scores the most points wins the game. And this is also a game where tabling your opponent doesn't mean you win, which I always look for that as sort of a marquee of a good war game. If you can get tabled and still win through the guile and cunning and playing to your objectives, I think that's pretty great.
Oh, absolutely. I'm always a fan of that, right? Because we cut our teeth on old school 40K and fantasy, and that was basically go forth and kill, right?
Yep.
Like and your win conditions were like major victory or squeaked it out or draw, and it was all based on how many people you killed. So now that we have games with objectives, that should be the focus.
Yes. And the objectives in this game can be deeply thematic. And we'll get into why that is. Okay, so another thing to note about this game, it does have custom dice. There are 3 types of dice. There are attack dice, defense dice, and magic dice. They're all D6s. And really what it is just these are actually some of the better custom dice that I think I've come across. MCP, I think, still is maybe the best justification for custom dice. They work really well.
Yeah.
But these dice are kind of they feel like the progenitor of like that MCP style, where the faces really have dynamic and uses, right? And so an example I can give is on the attack dice. So again, you have a D6, right? And so on your D6, you have 2 smash or hammer results,
right.
1 sword result, 1 single support result, 1 double support result, and 1 critical success. And this is important because every model that you attack with has either a sword or a hammer as the thing that they are looking for when they swing at an attack. And so right off the bat that you either have a 50-50 or a 1/3 chance to hit, because critical successes are always going to be successes, right?
Okay.
And So with 2 hammers and a crit, that's half the results. And with a crit and a sword, that's 2/3 or 1/3 of the results. Two out of 6. And then supports have to do with how many of your friendly models are adjacent to what you're attacking. So think Guild Ball.
Mm-hmm.
And so single support, if you have 1 guy adjacent, becomes a success. Double support, if you have 2 guys adjacent, becomes a success. And so that's how the dice work. And that's really cool. It's really smooth math. So if you're like trying to set yourself up so if I set myself at double support and I'm looking at you and my guy rolls hammers, I know I'm 5-6 hitting, baby. Like there's the odds of me hitting on 1 dice are very high.
Right.
And so that really informs the way you play the game, the way you move, the way you push, the way you position. And the defense vice are similar. Actually, the defense vice, you swap hammers for shields and swords for dodges. And then each unit has one of those as their defense profile. So you've always got either a 50-50 block or a 1/3 block by default, right? And then those go up with supports. And the supports, like Guild Ball, the same. It's like if one of your people is adjacent to the person attacking you, you have support there because they're sort of running interference.
Right.
So it's just if you know how the support worked in Guild Ball, it's basically the same thing, just in hexes here,
which is even easier to measure.
Within an inch. Right. You're not measuring within an inch. You're just measuring if you're adjacent via a hex. Yep. And then there's magic dice, and the magic dice are cool. Just know there's a magic system. There's only 3 sides of the magic dice, but it's a similar thing, right? You're looking for crits, channels, or focus, and you have some odds of hitting one or the other when you roll the dice.
Right.
Similarly to the attack and defense, but mostly you're rolling the attack and defense dice as you go. So it does have custom dice. Another cool thing about this game is that the war bands themselves are predefined. So that's not to say there's no list building in this game.
That was going to be my ask.
Absolutely list building, but it doesn't look like what you think it looks like. And what I mean by that is, just like God tier, when you bring a champion in God tier, it comes with its lackeys, right? It comes with its minions.
Right.
When you play Underworlds, you pick a warband, and that warband is fixed. There's nothing you can do about it. So when I bring the Headsman's Curse, I'm always going to have the Bearer of the Blade, the Sharpener of the Blade, the Scripter of the Sentence, and the Bearer of the Block. Always going to have those 4 models. Nothing I can do about it.
Right.
But you do have your deck. And your deck consists of an objective deck and a power deck. And we're going to talk about the formats of the game after we talk about the gameplay loop itself.
Sure.
But the formats of the game are where you get deck building options. And the deck building is what people who play Underworlds refer to as list building.
Right.
Because when you build your glory deck, that's your objective deck. That deck, it defines the way you score victory points outside of killing.
Okay.
Right? So you get to customize the things you're going to score points doing.
Which, I love stuff like that.
Yes, I do. And then the power deck is how you are going to customize your tricks.
Okay.
So you have basically what you have in the game is you've got there's actually a lot of different kinds of power cards, but mostly they go into upgrades or the combat tricks or spells and stuff.
Okay.
And so you're mixing your upgrades, which you can upgrade your fighters as you go through a game of this game, which is really cool. And then you also have combat tricks, which are like pushes and a lot. There's like so many, and they're also very thematic. These things are all of the different tricks you can do are super thematic to the warband that you're playing. And I'll go over some examples of those from my warband, the Headsman's Curse, as we go. But just know that, like I said, it's a combat trick deck and a combat tricks, we'll say, deck and a objective deck.
Okay.
And again, this is a VP based game. You achieve it's called glory in the game, and it's important to actually call it glory as a differentiator from victory points, because when you get glory, typically when you score it, it comes in as face up glory, and then you can spend the glory as you play the game to equip objectives onto your character, or equip upgrades onto your characters. So the way you upgrade your characters is first by scoring points, by getting glory, and all your spent glory counts as points at the end of the game. It's just how much glory you have, but it's better to call it, because you don't spend your victory points to like, it just sounds dumb to be like, I'm going to spend a victory point to do this objective.
Well, but you're also not really, right? Because you said that still counts at the end.
It does. You're using your glory. You are, if you think about it, you're basking in the glory of what you've done, the slaughter or objectives to make your guys stronger.
Right. So I mean, even just in the definition of how they're using it, you're not spending your victory points because you're keeping them as victory points.
Exactly. You're basically using it as a resource. So your victory points become a resource that you can sort of spend to equip upgrades as you play the game.
So I got a question for you on that. Mm-hmm. How does the game keep that from one player just absolutely running wild on it because they got out ahead early and now could buy a whole bunch of upgrades?
Well, so there's some randomness by you have to draw the cards out of your power deck, and your power deck, we'll start talking about it now, right? The power deck is made up of 20 cards. And basically it has to be a minimum of 20 cards.
Okay.
And the number of non-upgrades has to be equal to the number of upgrades. That's the restriction. So your standard power deck, yes, your standard deck is 10 and 10. It actually, like, anybody who's played a lot of card games knows that when somebody tells you what the like minimum that your deck should be, that's probably what your deck should be. Right. Because if you go above that, then you're thinning your deck out and lowering the chances of drawing the cards that you want to see.
Right.
So you want to keep it at 20, and that means you're going to have 10 upgrades and 10 combat tricks, or plots, ploys, etc. And that means you're not always going to have upgrades in your hand.
Right.
To spot, and then you're not always going to have the upgrades that you want when you want them, and also again, points are scored from both killing and from the objective cards, and the objective cards are not always based on combat. So getting out to an early lead can mean different things to different warbands. Right. Because some warbands want to get on objectives. Some warbands want to be in enemy territory or no man's territory, which is the middle of the board. Mm-hmm. So, like, some warbands do want to kill. Some warbands, they don't even care if they hit. They just want carnage. Right. They just want to. They don't want to be in a fight. They don't really care how they're doing in the fight. And so, like, a lot of the points you score aren't from killing stuff. So, like, getting out to an early lead doesn't really mean a lot because it's pretty easy to equalize. And I will say I have been in a few lopsided games, but most of the games don't end lopsided, even if they start that way. So I like anything, right? It's impossible for me to be like, it's a dice game, right? And you've only got 12 activations, and so, like, the RNG can be pretty brutal. I'm not even going to pretend like it can't be. The RNG can be pretty rough in this game, but the thing is that it when you play the game, it is supposed to be best 2 out of 3, and the points themselves aren't always scored from combat. So there's a lot of ways to make up for a slow start.
Cool. Because I mean, that's always the thing that you get concerned about in situations like that is, does it just become a blowout and then it's not fun for anybody? But the best two out of 3 is also a nice touch as well. Because you could get blown out one game, but the next one you could be doing well.
Exactly. And my experience is the games go 30 minutes to an hour. That's like the sort of range.
Now, is that for all 3 or?
No, per game. Yeah, per game. And I think the way that competitive rules go is they give you 45 minutes per game as an average.
That seems right.
So that's like, cool. So that's the like how that works. All right. So now we'll go into sort of like the core stuff. The warbands in the game are made up of 3 to 7 models. It's actually really important because the warbands are statted based on how many models they have. And also, when you look at a 3-model warband, we think of that as like an elite warband. And if you think about it in wargaming terms, right? When you bring the Custodes to a 40K game, you're not going to be looking at the same amount of models as the person bringing Gene Stealer cults.
Right.
And then on the other end of that spectrum is 7. And the reason why that is that when the hexes on the boards have 7 deployment zones per side.
Okay.
So the maximum that you could have is 7, right? Because as you're deploying, 7 is the most spaces that your models can go into.
Sure. That makes sense.
And then 3 is the minimum, because if it goes above 3, then you have to start statting the characters in a way that's really rough for the person with the lower model count. And I'll explain why in a second.
Okay.
Okay, so models themselves, they have, this is what you're going to have on a model, because the model, they're cards, right? Every model has its card. The cards are double-sided. And so the stats that you have you have your health profile, which is the number of wounds that you take before you die. Attack profile, which tells you how many dice that you roll and what symbol you're looking for on those dice when you roll.
Okay.
And you can have multiple attack profiles. I'll say that, like models can have multiple attacks. You also have your defense which is how many defense dice you roll and what symbol you're looking for as a success when you roll a dice.
Okay.
Then you also have abilities that a model might have and the criteria for inspiration. And so inspiration is like glory in the other side. You meet a criteria based on your warband, and when you meet that criteria, you flip the model over into their inspired side, and they gain something. Usually they gain something. There's actually one warband where they get worse.
Oh, jeez.
Well, the reason why is that because they start inspired, they're undead, and they start inspired. And as they are brought back to life, they uninspire because they're like losing chunks of their body.
Right. They're like, oh, crap.
Yeah. So, but mostly you get better when you inspire.
Sure.
But that should tell you something about how creative the designers are of this game and how much they play with the design space. But that generally you get better. So you're going to get a new ability. You're going to get more health, more defense, better attack profiles, maybe a brand new attack that you didn't have on the front side of your card.
Right.
So and that's really cool. And I'll give you a couple examples of what this looks like. So I have a warband. They're orcs, and they get inspired as soon as they take damage. The second they take damage, they get inspired.
Sounds orky.
Yep. As soon as they feel the fight, boy, the blood gets pumping, and the fungus gets pumping. I don't know. And then they're ready to go.
Yeah.
And then I have my other warband, the Headsman's Curse. And so what happens with them is when your warband collectively earns 3 condemned counters, they all inspire simultaneously.
Oh.
It's very cool. It's very thematic. And the way that I'll talk about this a little bit later, because I want to save it for when we're talking about the cool things about the game. But it's just to say that there's a lot of variation. I have another warband, the Sepulchral Guard, the ones I'm painting right now, where a lot of them get inspired when they're raised back from the dead. So like they all start on, and they're skeletons. And so after they've fallen once and they resurrect the first time, then they inspire because they're back in the fight and they're ready to go.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. I like that.
And this informs the person who's playing the warband a little bit how they should play them, right? That's the first thing that the cards tell you, is they tell you a lot about what the play style of the warband is,
right,
and what the flavor of the warband is based on the abilities and their inspiration mechanic.
Okay. No, that makes sense.
So that's cool, right?
I like that. Yep.
Okay. So now we'll talk about the decks of cards, because the way the game works, right, is I take an activation, you take an activation. So on your activation, what you're doing is you are looking first and foremost, right, at the start of the game, you set your boards out, and then you set the objectives, and then you draw your cards. And once you've drawn your cards and you've seen what your cards are, that's when you deploy your models. And so you're looking at your cards and you're going, these are the first 3 objectives that I have access to. How can I do this? How should I deploy my models?
Right.
And this is why the reason I'm bringing this up is because we're going to talk about a little bit more in depth about how these cards work. So the Glory deck is your objective-based deck, and there are two kinds of objectives. Well, yeah, there's two kinds. There are surges, and there are end-of-round objectives.
Okay.
And so you're working toward whatever combination of those you have. And so you might have one that says, at the end of the round, score this if your warband leader took an enemy model out of action, gain a glory, right? That might be, as an example, a simple objective to score. Or it might be, if you are standing on objectives whose numerical value equals 6 or more, because the objectives themselves, the objective hexes, have numerical values on them. And so if you're standing on the 4 and the 2, that equals 6, that satisfies the condition for that thing.
Okay.
And I might also have one that says, score this at the end of the round if every one of your surviving models has a charge token.
Okay.
Right. And so you are looking at your objective cards that are, again, very thematic to your warband. And I'll talk about some more thematic ones. The ones I'm describing now are more generic. So you can sort of just grok out in your head what they look like, right? The things you might be playing toward.
Sure.
And you look at those and that's how you set your game plan up. Like how that's going to dictate your order of activations, right? How you're activating your models, what you're doing, where you're going. And the surges are really cool because surges can happen. They're basically like reactions. So they happen in sort of these reaction windows that happen at different time. There's the different timings within a turn. And so the reactions might say, like they're so varied and so thematic, but the way that they work on paper is you score them when you satisfy the condition.
Okay.
And then once you satisfy the condition, you get the points, and then you immediately draw another glory card.
Okay.
Out of your deck. And so you might say, Kevin, why don't I get to just do all of those? I don't want to wait till the end of round. But because like you have to have the same amount of objectives as non-objectives, you have to have the same amount of non-surges as surges.
Okay.
So your deck generally is going to be 6 surges and 6 end of round objectives.
Makes sense? Yep.
Cool.
No, that's good. Keep it. So this way you're not stuck on one or the other.
You're not stuck on one or the other, and there's no guarantee of how you're going to draw them or when you're going to see them.
Right.
And that goes to the, like, keeping the game fair. Like there's just variance at a lot of different stages at the game. And since both players are sort of at the mercy of that variance, it really does average out. It comes out in the wash a lot in this game.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why MCP works, right? Like, the custom dice in that game are pretty freaking swingy, right?
They can be very swingy. Yep.
But because they're swingy for everybody, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it usually comes out. And since the card drawing is a little bit swingy, the dice are a little bit swingy, the fact that your deck composition has to be like equal surges, equal non-surges, equal upgrades, equal non-upgrades, you have these like situations where, it barely does come out in the wash.
Right.
So that's a really cool aspect of it for me. And the other deck is your power deck. Oh my God, man. This is so cool. This is where we're going to start talking about formats a little bit. Because the way that this works, you know what? We don't have to. We don't have to right away. We can just talk about the power deck because you have gambits and you have upgrades. And so upgrades will do things like a simple version of an upgrade might be this model gains 1 move. Okay. Or this model gains 1 health, or this model gains this attack, and the upgrade is like a sword, right? And then that sword has this attack profile. But they could be really cool. So I'll start to describe my main warband, the Headman's Curse. So there is a model in my warband called the Bearer of the Block, and he's just like a big ghost that's carrying around a decapitation block. Like if you've ever, when somebody gets decapitated, they put their head down on the block that's got a spot for their neck to go in.
Yeah, it's that.
He's just carrying that thing around.
Nice. It just feels very British.
It really does. And his special ability that he always has on both sides of his card is that while he is supporting a fighter, that fighter has cleave. And that basically means it ignores the defense results of your opponent's dice, or the shield result specifically of your opponent's dice. So it's really dangerous. Because he's supporting the decapitation, right? That's what he's there to do.
Makes sense.
He's there to make the heads roll. And so there's an upgrade in my deck called Lurking Crony.
Oh, jeez.
And it says, if this model is adjacent to the model making the attack, it also counts as supporting.
Oh.
So he doesn't have to be adjacent to the model being attacked. He can be adjacent to the model doing the attack.
Right. So
and the card is so funny because it's the bearer of the block kind of like hiding behind the main killer of the warband, the wielder of the blade, which is just deeply thematic and funny.
Right. Yeah, I like that. That's hilarious. You have to send me that picture.
Yeah, for sure. But like that gives you an idea of how thematic these upgrades are, right? And every warband, and that's an example. So you spend a glory, I can equip Lurking Crony to any of my models, but it really has the name, the bearer of the block printed on it. It doesn't, but like you always put it on that guy because he has the best. Like it's always good to have support, but his support is better than everyone else's because he gives you cleave, which is huge.
That sounds big.
Yeah, it's huge. But that's an example of an upgrade. And then you have lots of cool gambit spells. So my warband, as an example, has a gambit spell, and I don't have the cards in front of me. I should have brought them down. Shame on me for not bringing my deck down. But it's got an upgrade, and I think the upgrade is called like your service is not over.
Okay.
And what it is it basically resurrects a dead chain rasp.
Oh, geez.
And so my main model is not a chain rasp, but the 3 supporting models are.
Uh-huh.
And so this is a thing that I can play in the power step to resurrect one of my models.
Gross.
And it comes back wounded. But like it still comes back, which is cool. It's a ghost. It comes back. That's thematic. I like it.
As it should, yeah.
So I have another one as an example of one of these cards. It's a non-upgrade that's called Condemned Step Forward.
Ooh.
And
okay.
Basically the text on the card is choose 2 models and switch their position, and then give any enemy models a condemned counter.
Okay. What does the condemn counter do?
When I kill a model, I get a condemn counter. Uh-huh. If I get 3 condemn counters, all my models inspire.
Oh, wow. Okay. Gotcha.
So I want to be condemning models.
Gotcha.
But if you're thinking about how this works and you're thinking about how war games work, what this really means is that I can put you in a position. I can charge you, as an example. I can charge you with the bearer of the block and swing the block at you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then when it's going to become my turn again, I can play Condemn Step Forward, and I can change the position of the bearer of the block and your model.
Right.
And then I can safely charge that model with my real killer.
Gotcha.
And have support from the bearer of the block and put the condemn counter on your model.
All right. Yep. I'm seeing this. It's fun little shenanigans like that in your little group there.
Yes. And every warband, again, has fun little shenanigans like this that they can do.
Right.
So it's really cool. And so what we should actually now talk about what combat looks like. Because the dice in this game it's kind of interesting the way that it works. Because it's intuitive once you understand it, but the first time you see it, you're like, what, huh? Because you roll the dice, right? And you and your opponent roll the dice equal to your profile and whatever upgrades or gambits you play. Because you might play gambits that let you roll additional dice or whatever. You roll your dice, your opponent rolls their dice, and you're looking for successes for whatever that means. So if your defense criteria says you need shields, you're looking for shields. My offense says I'm looking for hammers. I'm looking for hammers. And then we see who has the most successes. And the person with the most successes wins the roll.
Okay.
But criticals are better than successes. So if I have a critical, you could roll 3 defense dice. You're looking for shields. All 3 of them are shields. If I roll a crit, doesn't matter.
Okay. Does it get through all 3 of them or just one?
It does.
Ooh.
It does.
Okay.
Yes.
Gross.
Crits are like super success. Exactly. Yeah. Gross. Crits are super successes. And so, but it's really cool because the math becomes very simple because a lot of this is really nice and it speeds up gameplay because you get into a state, right, where like I might roll 2 dice and I roll a crit and a success. So I roll a critical and a success.
Okay.
Now criticals cancel criticals, right?
Okay.
So if I roll a crit and you roll a crit, it's a wash.
Right.
Basically ties go to the defender.
Okay.
If that makes sense,
yep.
right? So, but the thing is, if I roll a crit success and you've only got 1 dice you can roll, you can't win. So I'm going to wound you.
Right.
Right. Because you've only got 1 dice. The best you can roll is a crit. Our crits cancel and I still have a success. So my success. So it does make a lot of the dice math really easy to grok because there's not a lot of dice you're rolling. And it's really the reason that the crits being super successes is nice is because it allows for circumstances like that where you can very quickly see deterministic results. And you're not like bean counting dice, right? After you roll a big stack and your opponent rolls a big stack and you're sort of sorting them out. There's none of that.
Right.
Because you can really quickly determine what happens based on the attacker's rolls or the defender's rolls.
Okay.
And because that's equally true on defense, right? If I roll defense and I roll a crit defense and you only rolled 1 dice on offense, fuck it, my shields are up. You can't do anything about it.
Right.
And that's really nice. And again, we talked about it, how successes go up as you have more criteria. So if you have single support or double support, those faces on your dice also become successes. And so it is good to, because like it's great to be able to roll 2 dice because if you have double support, you've got lots of chances to hit on either attack profile.
Right.
It's either 4 out of 6 or 5 out of 6 that are successes. So really good to have that double support. But again, the criticals are kind of super successes. And I just want to like sort of throw that out there because again, the variance is high. And one of the things I want to make sure people understand is that this game is great, but if you're not necessarily one of the people that can withstand some sort of wild variance, because if you're paying attention, what I said is that ties go to the defender. And so that means like crit defense can be brutal, man, because like you can feel like you're attacking a brick wall sometimes. Cause like I've had games where I have rolled like 3 successes and my opponent crit defensed 5 times in a row.
Right. Jeez.
And you're just like, ugh. But like, it's a dice game. Just go into this game knowing it's a dice game.
Right.
And I kind of actually like it because it makes it really exciting. It makes the thing about that I love about the crits, and the crits don't explode either, which is great, right? There's none of that, but it makes crits very impactful. They kind of feel like the Red Joker in Malifaux, but it's a 1/6 instead of 152.
So you're going to see it
right?
more? Yeah.
You see it more often, right?
Yeah.
It's high impact and it comes up more often than you think. So much so that there's a podcast called Can You Roll a Crit about the game. So the crits are cool. They're super successes. And that's really, and that's the game, right? You're moving models, trying to like out card play your opponent. And this is where we said it's a card game, right? Because if you've been like sort of thinking about how this works as I've been describing it, every turn has this structure where you're going activation step, power step. So I take an activation, I have a power step, it's my opponent's turn. But the way that the power step works is I play a card, you play a card, I play a card, you play a card until we both pass.
Okay.
And so a lot of power steps, that might just be like, I have no power, you have no power, pass to your activation.
Sure.
But it also might be like, I play an upgrade, I play a gambit, I play a gambit, I play an upgrade. Okay. Right? And it can go back and forth. And the card play can do a lot of funny things because you can get into a situation where I might play a card that's like, my next attack roll gets +1. And I might be in a position where I'm telegraphing what my move is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I might go, I play this Gambit card and it teleports my model across the board. So now you no longer have that target that you think you're going to have.
Okay.
Yeah, I got to do the Nedry. I couldn't resist. But that's where the sort of like Magic the Gathering, Flesh and Blood, Lorcana sort of card game comes in.
Right.
Because you go back and forth playing these cards and doing these things, and every time you do it, there's that chance for back and forth counterplay, and you might have the perfect card to sort of like counteract what your opponent thinks they're doing.
Right.
And again, really cool. And the other thing that's neat is that most of the time, your opponent's power step is the power step that's most important for you, because a lot of the gambits that you're going to play affect what you're going to do on your activation. And so you're waiting for your opponent's power step for you to be like, I'm playing this card, I'm playing this card, I'm playing this card, and now I'm going to activate my supercharged bro. And it's cool. It's very cool that that's how it works. And I want to make sure I highlight that because there's a lot of card play in this game. Because if the card play wasn't there, it would be just like, I move this model, roll some dice. You move that model, roll some dice.
Right.
But the card play and the attaching of upgrades and every upgrade in this game is very impactful. Like when you play the upgrades in this game, your opponent is groaning every time. Because they're all really like that lurking crony upgrade. Mm-hmm. Bro, it's so strong. So another one that I have is called like, it's like Ever Living Executioner is the name of it. And as soon as I play it, my model now always counts double success as defensive successes, or double support as defensive successes. So now I immediately, my defense capabilities go higher, and my chances of rolling successes on defense is higher, and my guy is much harder to kill. Every upgrade is highly impactful. But that's like the core loop of the game, right? You activate a model, it goes to a power step, we play cards, you activate a model, you do whatever happens, we exchange cards back and forth until the 12 activations are over, and we calculate glory.
Right.
Important thing to note, another way to earn glory is called bounties. And so that basically what that means is if you kill a model that has between 1 and 4 wounds, you earn a glory. And if you kill a large model, which is 5 wounds or more, you get 2 glory for killing that bigger model.
All right.
So that's also a way to earn glory, is by killing. And you're gonna want to do the killing.
Okay.
Because killing gets you glory.
Right.
But there are war bands that have like bigger glory opportunities and glory opportunities that don't involve combat in their decks. Okay. So they can just do shenanigans the whole game and still earn points without really doing much killing. But it is worth noting that killing is always worth points.
Okay. So a little bit again, it feels like they were watching what Guild Ball was doing at the time, right? Like between the crowd outs and going, oh, you can score by killing and by scoring goals.
Points. Yeah, exactly. They're right. That's very true. That's actually an analog I hadn't considered, but it is a pretty true one. I also want to correct myself. Killing models is always worth glory until it isn't. There are ways to give your models kind of like insignificant so that they don't count for bounties, but that's rare.
Well, of course, and I mean somebody's got to pull that lever, right? Like that's a clear lever to pull.
It's as rare as the Inspire side being weaker than the non-inspired side, but yeah, they do play with the design space a lot. Okay, so we've talked about. We talked about hobby progress. We talked about why we're talking about this game. We talked about like what I think is cool and the basics and the stuff. So now we have to get into like what I think is the most fun section of the episode. And thank you if you've made it through this, because we've actually gone pretty long already. But this is like what's different and what I think is really cool right now, and some illustrations of why I think it's really cool. So one of the core differences between Shadespire, Beastgrave, Night Vault, etc., all the way up through when they made this rules change. So it used to be that you couldn't activate a model once it had a charge counter.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, and this was like a huge hindrance for low model warbands, because if you had 3 models, you really only were getting 3 activations per turn, no matter what you did.
Okay.
Because you couldn't do anything once you charged out. But the rule is now, once your model has a charge token, it can't activate until the rest of your models have tokens.
Oh, that makes more sense.
But once everybody has a token, they can't take super actions. So they can't take 2-part actions like charging. Charging, right, is a move and an attack.
Sure.
So they can't charge a second time, but if they're next to a model, they can swing.
Right.
Or they can move on to an objective. They can do something.
Right. That's better than just being like, oh, I'm sitting here.
Correct. So there's no more feels bads by charging all 3 of your models and then not being able to do anything. Sure. That is no longer a thing, because the way that it used to work is if you had a 3 model warband, you were always spending one of your actions typically to draw a card, because you can always spend one of your actions to draw a victory point card. And that rule still exists. Yeah, but you can still do that.
I mean, realistically though, like, you know, that kind of sucks, right? Like a lot, because then you're just being like, oh, all right, well, now I got to do this. Taking away some of that agency.
It does suck, and you know, this is kind of shame on me that I didn't talk about all the different because I'm really our podcast is more like nailing like what it feels like to play a game than actually going through everything mechanically. But like the things you can do during your turn, like moving, charging, you can stun, barge, you can put your model on guard, and so putting your model. This is actually an important one. Putting your model on guard means that dodges and shields count as successes. So that's actually pretty good, because there are cards too that like put your model on guard, so you don't have to spend an action to do it.
Right.
You can make an action printed on your card or upgrade. So that's like your spells, your attack actions. You can draw a power card, or you can discard an objective and then draw another objective. So those are the things you can spend one of your 4 activations doing. But this is to say old 3 model warbands always had to spend one of their active, unless they were adjacent to a model, so they could start by swinging instead of charging.
Okay.
Because once you charge, you get a charge token. And then again, you know, once your model's charged, it can't do anything until all your models have charge tokens.
But let me ask you a quick question here. Is the only way to get engaged to charge?
Yes, okay. Unless you're already engaged, okay. Right? Because like that's the thing. Once you've been charged, if your model's just standing there, you can swing.
Right.
And swinging doesn't put a movement counter on you, either move or charge. So you can just be like swing, 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 swing with the same model 4 times if they haven't charged. But once you've charged, they can't do anything until all your models have charged.
Okay, and so I guess gameplay wise, or at least decision making wise, that then you have to kind of decide, is it worth going in there? Because then I can conceivably just be wailed on by this other guy.
Yeah, that is a concession. Okay. And it's also worth talking, before we get into the cool stuff, worth talking about the end phase, because I mentioned there's 3 rounds, right? And so a round is I take 4 actions, you take 4 actions, and then we go into the end phase. And we remember I was talking about objectives that score in the end phase.
Yes.
We score those, and then we can discard any objective cards that we don't want to hold into the next round.
Good.
Like if I have a card and I'm like, God damn it, there's no way I can score this, you can just trash it.
Okay.
And you can also do that. You can also do that with your power cards. So either one of your styles of cards, you can throw them in the trash if you don't want them. And then you draw back to hand size. So you draw up to 3 objectives, up to 5 power cards.
Okay, makes sense.
So you can carry as much or as little as you want through the round.
Sure.
But it's worth noting that, because that's sort of, someone was probably like, well, how do I get more objective cards? If they're not surges, you score your end phase objectives, and then you can trash as much as you want.
Okay.
And this actually works out really well. The way that it works out is you usually see 10 objective cards. I would say 10 to 12 you see every game, because you're going to naturally see probably 9 right? Because you're probably not carrying one through most of the time. So on average, you're going to see 9 because you're going to discard some, you're going to surge some.
Sure.
Generally, you're going to see 10, and sometimes you're going to see all 12, 11 or 12. So that's kind of cool, right? Because you can always count on seeing most of your deck, and that's equally true of the power deck. You're usually going to see 16 of those cards.
Okay.
And sometimes you see more than 16 of them.
I mean, which is important, right? Because you want to know that you're going to see your cards. You're going to know, because and the thing too is, right, like even if you get the card you want, you might not be in a position to score it at this moment in the game.
And I should say you're going to see 15, right? Because ideally you want to play or discard all 5 of them every round,
right?
Unless you have one that you want to carry through, especially if you're digging for a specific upgrade.
Sure.
Because I'll tell you, spending an action to draw a power card feels real bad. You don't want it. That's not what you want to be spending your 1/12 of your game doing.
Right. Yeah. No shit.
So you're going to see 15 of them usually. And that affects the math of your deck building too, right? And that's why you generally aren't going to put more than 20 cards in that deck, because if you already know you're only generally going to see 3/4 of them, you really want to tune that thing to 20 cards.
Okay.
All right. So now we'll go back to the cool stuff. So we talked about charged out, right? So now I'm going to tell you, Paul, about a rule you're really going to like, because I remember. So the reason I bounced off this game, the 2 reasons I bounced off was that charged out thing where you like would often spend activations doing nothing.
Right.
And then the other thing was drawing cards that you couldn't fucking use.
Yo, that's the worst.
Okay. So let's talk about that. So we talked about the fact that you can spend an action now to just like, it's to ditch an objective card and draw a new one. You can always spend an action and do that.
Okay.
But in a power step, you can always take an action or in your power step. Remember, we passed back and forth playing cards.
Uh-huh.
One of the things you can always do is salvage.
Okay.
Salvage, in my opinion, is the best mechanical rule they made to this game. So a lot of upgrades and cards have a restriction printed on the bottom that restrict them to a model.
Okay.
Right? So you can only play it on that model. If your card has a restriction that says you can only play it on that model, and that model is dead, for free during a power step, you can throw it in the trash and draw a new card.
Oh, that's good.
It is immense. It doesn't sound like a lot, but the game didn't used to be that way. And so if you drew a card for a dead model, it was just a wah, 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 wah. You're just stuck with the card.
Right.
And it's clogging your hand. It was terrible. And it was again, I think it was that happening to me and having like 3 cards in my hand that I couldn't play going into my 3rd round. I was just like, fuck this game.
Yeah.
So that salvage rule really is a big part of what saved this game for me. The combination of the charged out and the salvage, and then the next thing we're going to talk about, because the next thing we're going to talk about is actually why I decided to give the game another chance.
Okay. I'm excited to
hear
this.
So this gets to the release model of the game and the formats of the game.
All right.
Ooh, this is a big conversation. So there's 3 ways to play this game right now. Well, 4 ways, but no one plays the 4th way. My understanding is no one really plays the 4th way. The 3 ways that you play the game are Rivals, Nemesis, and Championship. And then the 4th one is Relic.
Okay.
Okay. Are you ready for this, Paul?
I am.
It's so cool. Rivals. When you say, hey, do you want to play a game of Rivals? What that means is there's no deck building at all.
Okay.
When you pick up this game now, so if you were to go and buy a warband box off the shelf, that warband comes with the models that it needs to fight and its Rivals deck. It has no universal cards in it, Paul.
Oh, okay.
They are only the cards for that warband specifically.
Okay.
So that means if you don't like a warband, you don't have to fucking buy it.
Are you reading the questions I'm writing down?
I might have been. Because if you don't want to buy a warband, don't fucking buy it. It doesn't have any cards you will ever need in it.
Okay, that's one of the things that I was worried about, because I feel like that was a concern initially when the game launched.
It was. People bought every warband to have every card.
Right. Like X-Wing did.
Uh-huh.
So are there universal cards?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll get into how that works.
Are they coming in like the season box or whatever you want to call it?
They are.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
And also one other way that we'll talk about.
Sure.
Because there are cons. There are cons. The Universal Rivals decks that don't come in the season boxes are a pro and a con, and we'll talk about that in a second. So when you say we're going to play Rivals, you can play with the Rivals deck that comes with your warband, or you can play with any Universal Rivals deck.
Okay.
So you can say there's Universal Rivals deck called Beastbound Assault. You can say I'm playing this warband with Beastbound Assault, or I'm playing this warband with Force of Frost, or Fearsome Fortress. There's a whole bunch of them, right? You can be like, I'm playing with this one. But it just means there's no deck building. You're playing with a Rivals deck. A Rivals deck is 12 objective cards and 20 power cards, period. That's how they work. That's how they release.
All right.
This is amazing. Think about what this does for the Christmas morning test. These are push fit models, and there's no deck building. You push fit the models together, you shuffle the cards, and you're playing the game.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I'm gonna go out from one step further than that, because then there's people like me who just don't like deck building, building card decks, and I don't have to worry about it.
Let me tell you, Paul, there's a format for you.
Ooh, okay.
And it's not Rivals. Rivals is great. I like to think of Nemesis as the John Cusack of card game formats. It's the everyman.
Yeah, okay. All right. What do we got here?
So here's how Nemesis works. When you sit down across from your opponent and you say, do you want to play a game of Nemesis? What you are agreeing to is you will take your Warband's Rivals deck, and you will take one Universal Rivals deck, and you will combine those decks any way you see fit.
Okay.
That's it. So, generally what that means is you are going to make one 12-card objective deck and one 20-card power deck out of those two decks.
Okay.
So, you get to do a little deck building and a little bit of customization, but you're not looking at the entire breadth of every card that's out.
Right.
You are looking at the sum total of 24 objectives and 40 power cards, and paring down half of each.
Okay. I think I could handle that.
Exactly. This format, when Skylar described to me what Nemesis was, I was like, fucking sign me up. Like, this is amazing. I don't have to sit and look and think about hundreds of cards and combinations and interactions. I can just look at two sets of cards and combine them in a way that I think will be good.
Yeah. I like it.
And the cool thing about this is, if you think about how this works, I can play a game and then be like, nah, I didn't like that one card. It didn't work for me. Is there a card I can just swap this with in the pile from these two decks, and then swap that in and try again?
Okay.
And it's not like I didn't like this card. What card out of 1,000 should I put in?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because if you're playing a CCG, it can be that vast or vaster.
Right.
Here, it's just, what in this very restricted card pool. It's that thing. It's that thing where it takes a restriction. The restriction is one Rivals deck, one Universal Rivals deck. How can I make the best deck out of these two?
Right. Well, and I mean, for somebody like me, right, who does not necessarily enjoy deck building, but will give it a go, that's a sweet spot for me, right? Because it allows me to have the fun of, deck building / list building without having to get into every last card that's out there.
Exactly.
So, give that to me. And that's that's one of the things I liked about Flesh and Blood is there's lots of
You're
cards.
to your hero.
But you're basing it on your hero, so it's eliminating a lot of cards.
Mm-hmm. It's true. That is a very, very, very freeing thing about Flesh and Blood, and even more freeing in Commoner, because then you're cutting out all the rares, majestics, and legendaries.
Right.
But yes, it is that way. It's very, very cool that way. Okay, so the last formats to talk about are Championship and Relic, which are very similar.
Okay.
And Championship and Relic say you can pull cards from, Relic is you can pull cards from your warband's deck, and then any universal cards that you want, basically.
Oh, interesting.
And Rivals is a little bit, or not Rivals, sorry. Relic is a little more restrictive because the cards also have to match your, what do they call it? The Grand Alliance.
Okay,
so
yeah.
Either, death, chaos, whatever. So it has to match be universal and match your, whatever your Grand Alliance is. That's kind of how Relic works.
Okay.
But Championship, the way Championship works is instead of worrying about Grand Alliance stuff, there are seasons in this game. And Nemesis actually uses the seasons too. And so the way that seasons work remember we talked about how the seasons they have the name, like Death Gorge,
right.
Shade Spire, Night Vault.
I think
Hollow.
Beef Grave was the best one. Beef Grave?
Beast Grave.
Yeah.
Beast Grave. Yep. So how this works right now, each season is effectively 6 months.
Right.
And there are always 2 years worth of seasons that are legal.
Okay.
So Death Gorge is the newest season. So if I go and buy Death Gorge, the Warbands and the Warbands Universal Rivals decks will be legal forever.
Okay.
The Universal Rivals decks will be legal for 2 years.
Okay. Gotcha.
And after 2 years, they fall out of rotation.
All right.
And that works for Nemesis. So when you're doing Nemesis, you take your Warband's deck and a legal Universal Rivals deck. So one of the decks that is currently in rotation, has not been rotated out.
Makes sense.
And the way Championship works is in Championship, you can build a deck with your Warband and then any cards from the Universal Rivals decks.
Makes sense.
And that gives you a much wider card pool. There are some restrictions in Championship too. The thing about it is it's complicated because there are things called plot cards inside of like the Universal Rivals decks can have what are called plot cards. And if you have a plot card, once you take a plot card, that is the only deck you can use with a plot card.
All right.
So like Breakneck Slaughter has a plot card as an example. It's a deck with a plot card, and there might be another. I can't think of an example of another one right now that has a plot card, but I couldn't take cards from both of them once I took one of them.
Right.
It's called being plot locked. And
Okay.
and so Championship has pretty, it has a little bit more restrictive, but the way that works is it lets them balance these universal decks so that they can't make broken combinations between them. So they can print a plot card, and then the plot card lets them print maybe a little bit more powerful cards in that deck because they know they can't be mixed with other plot locked decks.
I like it. I like that's how that's good stuff.
Works.
That's pretty smart though.
Exactly. And so Championship is it's basically like you have Rivals, which is fucking plug and play. You build the models, shuffle the cards, play the game. And Rivals is really fun because the Warband decks are hella thematic. They're hella thematic.
Right.
The new ones. And then you have Nemesis, your deck, Universal deck, smash them together however you want, play a game. Championship, full-blown deck building. And those are your 3 formats. And that's the game. And that's the release model. So the release model is every 6 months, we get a season box. So the season box has 2 warbands. Those warbands decks, the Universal Rivals deck, 2 boards, and all the tokens you need to play the game in the dice.
Okay. So in theory, if you buy every one of those seasons, you're going to end up with quite a collection of boards options.
You are. 100%. And also the boards rotate too. I didn't mention that.
Oh, okay.
The boards rotate with the cards.
Okay.
So you always have 2 years worth of boards that you can play.
Sure.
And then the boards rotate out. But that's good too, right?
Yeah.
That the boards rotate, because the boards can be pretty restrictive based on like lethal hexes, and there might be rules that were on the boards that aren't really rules in the game anymore, etc.
Sure.
Like some like spots that do special things. Like this current season Death Gorge has like frozen stuff, and they may rotate that frozen stuff out once Death Gorge rotates in 2 years. What was I going to say? So that's the one thing that happens. You get the season box.
Okay.
And then, so that's the first part of the 6-month season. And then in the preceding 6 months until the next season is released, you get 2 warband boxes. And so again, those warband boxes are ignorable if you don't like the warbands, because it's the models and the deck.
Okay.
And
good.
And then there are 2 Universal Rivals decks. And so I will say everything I've mentioned so far, massive plus. I love it.
Yeah.
I don't mind. I think if a living game is asking me to spend $90 every 6 months to play it, fuck it. I get models, I get cards, game on, I'm here all day. Because that's what a season box costs. Right. It's $90.
Right.
And really, if you go to a fair retailer or Amazon, it's like $85.
Sure.
Like again, Valhalla Hobby, Noah is a saint. $85 for a season box. I'm in, man. I get my models, I get to play, I get to paint my models. I love this game. I'm into it. That is perfect. And then show me 2 warband boxes that I can ignore or buy if I like. I love it.
Right.
Also, I love that these Universal Rivals decks that are sold separately out of the box are ignorable. Technically, if one of these comes out and you're like, if like me, I think what I'm going to be is forever, I'm going to be a Nemesis player. I'm going to be the player that's playing Nemesis. Right. The format where you take 2 decks and smash them together. So if I don't like one of these decks and I don't have a warband that this deck needs, I'm not going to buy it. I'm just not going to buy it. Sure. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. I'm not going to buy it.
Options. I like it.
They're options. But here's the thing that we've talked about these decks a lot. They're 32 cards, right? Mm-hmm. Paul, what do you think a fair price for 32 cards is? $10?
Yeah.
$15?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. And I'm going to base this comparison on Marvel Champions. If you are a Marvel Champions player and you buy a new hero, you get a 60 card playable out of the blister deck for $16. Okay. That sounds like a deal. Yeah. In the year of our Lord 2023. No shit. I'm here for a 60 card deck for $17 Give me that all day. A 32 card Universal Rivals deck is $29.99.
All right, that's not bad.
It sucks though.
Yeah.
It sucks. It's fine. If we look at Games Workshop as a company and what it costs to play Games Workshop games, if you buy everything for this game for a season, it's $90 for the season box, $40 for each warband.
How many warbands come out this season then?
Two outside of the core box.
Oh, that's not terrible.
So you're spending $90, and then I think MSRP it's $95. MSRP on the warbands is $45, so another $90. So we're at $180 right now, and then each of those other decks is $30, so another $60. Jeez. So we're at $240, $250 for a season. Hear me out. A Warhammer 40K army costs like $1,000 or more, right? So if it costs $240 every 6 months to be a completionist for this game, that's cheaper than playing a TCG.
Right.
And it's cheaper than playing most miniatures games for most hobbyists.
Right. That's the key. That's the key for most hobbyists, right? Because nobody's ever just done with their army.
100%. Let's be honest.
Yep.
So this game is pretty much a bargain to play, especially if you're just playing Rivals or Nemesis, a lot of those purchases are ignorable.
Right.
And if, for example, you love one of the warbands that comes out of the season box, you buy the season box and then the additional 60 for the 2 Universal Rivals decks, and you are fully up to date with every possible playable card for Championship.
Right.
And that's not bad. That's $140-ish to be fully competitive for 6 months, every 6 months. That's actually pretty great. In terms of what this hobby realistically costs most hobbyists, I think it's actually really fair.
Especially if you're like looking at 40K players who are buying, meta changing lists every couple months or whatever.
Exactly. Or even like even a Malifaux player who's like, you know what? I've been playing this keyword for a month. I'm going to spend $175 on a new keyword.
Right.
Like let's be on, everyone listen to this. Be honest with yourself. You do that. Yep. Like it's like 100% you do that.
If you don't, you are a rarity. You're a unicorn.
You are. The disciplined wargamer is the unicorn.
Yep.
Most of us spend way too much money. And here's the thing. I bought in, right? And I'm way in at this point. And here's my total spend. I bought Death Gorge. I bought it from Noah, so I got a real good price. Mm-hmm. I bought the Headsman's Curse. I bought that. I will say it was $35. I bought it from Noble Knight. And I paid with it store credit. So, do with that what you will. But so even if I was spending real money, my total spend on the game so far, where I would be is like $115, right?
Sure.
So we're at $115. And then I bought 2 Universal Rivals decks. Mm-hmm. I bought them for $19 each because I got them at Valhalla Hobby and Noble Knight respectively, and they have good prices on these things. So I got them for $19.99 a piece. So another $40. And then I also bought a warband from my buddy Oliver. And that's it. And where I'm at right now, I'm good. Like, I literally don't have to buy anything else because I'm only playing Nemesis.
Right.
And I bought the Universal decks that I did specifically to make Nemesis pairings with the warbands that I'm playing. And I'm spoiled for choice, Paul, because I have the 2 warbands that came with Death Gorge, the very cool Dirty Orc warband I bought from Oliver, my Super Ghosts. Oh, I also spent $30 on the starter kit from Barnes & Noble. I'm not going to ignore that. That's another $30 I spent. But that also came with 2 more warbands.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've spent just south of $200, I think, after everything was said and done. And I have like 6 or 7 warbands and 4 Universal Rivals decks to smash Nemesis decks together.
Right.
With my 5 different warbands. So I have like over 20 something combinations of things that I can make between Universal Rivals decks and my warband Rivals decks. Like I'm set until stuff comes out that I can either ignore or buy to play Nemesis.
Right.
And for me, it's like a Goldilocks situation, right? Because like I don't want to spend a lot more than that on miniatures games right now because I know myself, and I know once I have a painting backlog, I get a freeze and I get paralysis and I can't paint anything. Yep. And these models these warbands are 3 to 7 models a piece, and I can paint them at the pace by which I get inspired to play them.
Right.
It's so good. And also, like, if I decide I don't want to play Sirenized Razors, which is one of the warbands that came in Death Gorge, I can probably find a local and be like, hey, you want the Rivals deck and the sprue for like $30? And they'll be like, yes. And then that's a Universal Rivals deck or a warband that I can buy.
Right.
Like, it's fine. I'm very happy with the spend on this game right now. And I don't know how you feel about it. Now I've given you the full divulge of what it costs to play and what it's like to play the game.
Yeah. I mean, for me, part of it too is like it's GW, right? Like that's a tough sell for me. You know that.
Yep. I do.
And you know, it feels like if you are interested in GW's stuff, that this might be the ideal way to go, right?
I think outside of Warcry, it's their best game.
Yeah,
like,
so
it's not even close.
Because being able to, you know, and it would like allow you to play in the world, right, without actually having to invest in a full on like AOS,
and have even a faction identity. You want to play orcs?
Right.
Fucking buy the orc warbands. You want to play with the Ideneth Deepkin? Hell yeah, buy the Ideneth warbands.
Oh, I want to play with Ideneth Deepkin.
Dude, so Death Gorge, the new box. When we're done here, I'm going to have you look up the Sirenized Razors. That's the warband that comes with them. It's a 40 mil base with a giant octopus called Sephir. And the octopus is a little shit, by the way.
I'm on board with that. I like it.
It is a pain in the ass. It has this phase ink that allows it to just like boop. Just kidding. That's not where I am anymore.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's real.
Because
cool. All right.
Oh, go ahead.
Let's hold on now, because I wanted to sell you on how cool and thematic this game is, and we're gonna do it right now because you're already interested in this warband because it's Ideneth Deepkin,
sure,
and they have an octopus.
Yeah, I'm in on that. I like.
All right, here we go.
Go ahead.
Their inspiration mechanic is complicated.
Okay.
But once it settles onto you what it's doing, you're gonna be like, oh fuck, that's cool. All right, here we go. I'm going to try and do this from memory because I don't have the cards in front of me. So the Inspire text on the front of these 4 cards, because there's four in the warband, says, if this is game round 1 and you have finished your 3rd activation, inspire all your models.
Okay.
During the end phase, they uninspire. All right?
Okay.
The next sentence is if it is the 2nd round and you have finished activating your 2nd model, inspire all your models. In the end phase, uninspire them all. If you have activated your 1st model and it is the 3rd round, inspire all your models.
Yeah, I like that. That's fun.
It's the tide.
Yep.
Right? And the tide has to go all the way in for the 1st round, halfway in for the 2nd round, and partially in for the 3rd round.
Yep.
So you inspire with the tide. It's so fucking cool, man.
Yeah, I like that.
And so here and now I want to tell you about the other warband in this box, the Thricefold Discord.
Oh, okay.
So you might guess this is 3 models, the Thricefold Discord. They are Slaaneshi.
Of course.
They are 3 demons who the reason they're in the Death Gorge is that the cohort of Slaanesh army they were attached to was fucking sick of them bickering all the time.
Jeez. Okay.
All these 3 models did was talk shit. All these 3 characters did is talk shit to each other constantly. And the army was like, get the fuck out of here. Go find treasure in the Death Gorge. Do this thing.
Funny.
These 3 models hate each other, Paul. They hate each other.
Okay.
And so the inspiration mechanic is, and each one specifically hates one of the other ones.
Oh, that's fun.
Okay.
That's fun.
And so the way they inspire is if X model rolls no successes, Y model inspires. So they're like, you fucking suck, I inspire. Right? So like if one of them does horribly, the one that's watching the other one to fail and gets better and inspires.
Right. Huh.
Again, amazing theme. Like the theming on these models is so good. It's so good. And that's and all the modern warbands are like that.
Right.
All the modern warbands have really thematic, like deeply thematic inspiration mechanics, and then deeply thematic objective cards. And so now I'll talk a little bit about my warband, and then we'll get going because this is running really long. So my warband, the Headsman's Curse, we talked about them, and so now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about them.
Yeah.
They are the wielder of the blade,
okay,
the sharpener of the blade, the scripter of the sentence, and the bearer of the block. That is the 4 Night Haunt models in my warband.
Sure.
Their inspiration mechanic is based around getting 3 condemned counters. I have to earn 3 condemned counters. I earn a condemned counter by killing a model that is condemned.
Uh-huh.
I also earn I can gain additional condemned counters. The way I gain additional condemned counters is when I would gain a condemned counter, if that attack was supported, I gain an additional condemned counter. Okay. And if that model was a large model, meaning it had 5 wounds or more, I also get an additional condemned counter.
Huh.
So if you're keeping track, that means there is a way potentially for me to get 3 condemned counters from killing 1 model and then inspiring my whole team.
Right.
Okay, so here's what my models do. We talked about the bearer of the block. When he is supporting, he gives cleave, so he makes the defenses really bad for the model he's sitting next to. The scripter of the sentence has a ranged attack, and when I attack you, doesn't matter if I hit you or not, when I attack you, I can make a reaction to give you a condemned counter. And if you're thinking about the models, Paul, he's the guy pointing at the sheet of paper.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking he would be.
Yes. He's like, you die. That's that guy.
Your turn.
You're gonna die. Your turn to die. He condemns models.
Right.
The sharpener of the blade, piece of shit, 2-wound model, but has an ability. When it activates, it can put a wet counter on the leader of my warband. So he can basically wet the blade.
Okay.
So you're following WHET wet,
yes,
right? Like a whetstone.
Yep.
So he sharpens the blade for the wielder of the blade.
Okay.
The whetstone gives him +1 damage until he hits. Most things in this game are for the next activation or for the next action, and then they fall off.
Mm-hmm.
This is +1 damage until he fucking hits something.
Oh, okay.
And then we get to the wielder of the blade, who is a 5-wound monster that rolls 2 dice looking for hammers. So 2 dice on 50/50s. And when he hits, he does 3 damage. Most models in this game, Paul, have 3 or 4 wounds.
Right.
I would say 80% of models have either 2, 3, or 4 wounds.
Yeah, so he's doing some good damage, eh?
So with a whetstone, he is killing almost everything in the game.
Right.
In 1 shot.
Yep.
All right. So, and we're not done. We're not done here. Because but wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more.
So on the surface, now you see this is an aggro warband that has a pretty specific order of operations.
Right.
And that order of operations is sharpen the blade, condemn a model, get next to the model you're going to kill, charge and kill that model.
Right. Beat the shit out of it.
That's what we're doing. And we're using our cards to get the model we want in position to kill that model and get the condemn counter off of it and earn our thing.
Right.
That's cool, right? So now let me tell you about some of the things that I can do. One of the cards I have is like a scapegoat card. And so what it does is until the end of the round, it gives that model 5 wounds and makes it large.
Okay.
And you're like, well, why is that cool? Well, the reason it's cool is because when I try to condemn it, I'm attacking it and I'm going to probably do a damage.
Right.
When I charge with the bearer of the block to get next to it to support it, I'm probably going to do some damage.
Right.
And then I have the whetstone. So even if you have 5 wounds, I've probably hit you to do 1 or 2 damage, and I'm charging at you to do 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And so that card basically gives me a one-shot inspire for my whole team. And once my team inspires, they get very hard to kill. They do lots of extra dumb shit. So that's super cool, right? So now let me tell you about what, in my opinion, is the coolest part about this warband. The action on the headsman, the bearer of the blade, the wielder of the blade. The sword is called Terminus.
Okay.
Which is the Latin meaning basically the end of the road. Right? And so if you look at the model, at the end of Terminus, there are spirits coming off of the blade, because when he swings Terminus, he kills things.
Right.
And so the reaction to Terminus is when Terminus hits and kills an opposing model, if any of my chain rasps are out of action, I can instantly resurrect them in the space that I just beheaded the model.
Oh.
And so what that means is I'm conscripting their soul to do the thing of the model that I've lost.
Right.
So if I've lost the bearer of the block and I kill a model, I can make a new bearer of the block out of the spirit of the model that I just killed.
Huh. How
fucking cool is that?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like it.
It's rad. It is rad, man. And their objectives are all about killing models with condemn counters and, like, you know what I mean? They're all very thematic to doing the things that I want to do. One of them is called, one of the objectives is called, like, savoring the inevitable. And that card is in the end phase. If two of your models are adjacent to an enemy model, I score a victory point.
Oh,
because if two of my models are adjacent to you, that means the headsman is coming in to cut your head off, right? And so you're savoring the kill. And it's just like, and all of the stuff is like that, right? Like all of the objectives are deeply tied in to the things that you're going to be doing. And that's, again, true for every warband. And I'm getting a sore throat, so I... because I've talked about this game for like 2 hours now, and I feel like there's still things I want to talk about. There's like still cool. There's rules we didn't cover. There's cool war bands we didn't cover. There's cards we didn't cover. But the game is just in a very good state. I think as good as it's ever been, and I think in a position where it's the best time to jump in if you've ever been curious about it. Is what I'll say, and that's actually, I think, that sums up my final thoughts about the game.
So here's one of the things that I'm gonna say is that, I feel like, there's definitely stuff in GW's realm that, like, I'm interested in. Like, I think the Idanet Deepkin are awesome, right? But, anytime I'm like, oh, they have like the starter box, it's like $130. I could totally go in on like $130 and, dick around with the game. But then I start thinking, but then I have no rules for the game. And then it starts adding up really quick at that point, right? And this, like, to just kind of put your feet in the world, this actually seems like a pretty decent way to do it.
So I hadn't even considered that. But yeah, if you love Games Workshop's lore and you just want to step in without having to, like, get into the thing that is their full war games, boy, this is a really good way to do it. Especially if you like Age of Sigmar, and, like, let's be real, Age of Sigmar is really fucking cool.
Yeah, it's their best world right now. I mean,
I'm not gonna argue. You said it. I'm not gonna argue though.
No, it's true. I mean, even when Chris and I were playing that, a little more. Well, at the time it was somewhat regularly. I mean, it was a lot of fun. To me, it was a lot more fun than what 40K was putting out at the time.
Oh, 100%. It's very characterful, very fun. The whole world is it's so vibrant.
And I think,
and the lore is so cool. Like all the like, whenever you read a piece of lore about any faction in AOS, you're like, that's really cool. So.
Yep. And I mean, like, even looking at the Deepkin models that come in that set, they're really cool models, right? Like, and
Sirenai is really cool, Sephinir is cool, and even the two scrubs are awesome.
Right. And, like, looking at that, it's like, all right, well, that seems fairly reasonable. Like, you can live with that, right? But, like, to go and be like, oh, well, now I need, this starter box, and now I need this rule book, and blah blah blah, and you know, this is like, you know, I've been successful with, say, MCP, of going, you know what, I'm only interested in playing these guys. This is all I'm buying. Right? Like,
yeah, and so we have a guy in our locals that only plays orcs.
Yeah.
So he buys the season box, so he has the universal decks and the boards that he needs. Mm-hmm. And then he only buys orcs.
Yeah.
So if no orcs come out,
yeah. I mean, it makes sense. Deal. That's the way to. I mean, that's definitely the way to do it. Like I could totally see myself like getting a warband, you know, and just occasionally dicking around in the world.
Highly recommend it. Highly recommend it.
Like those Ideneth guys look awesome enough that, like, yeah, I could be in on that. But let me ask you another question. Let me ask you a question. Mm-hmm. So I'm clearly poking around on the GW site. When I go to Underworlds, it only lists 10 items. Am I doing something wrong, or is like all the old stuff out of print now?
Most of the old stuff's out of print.
Interesting.
Yep. This is just GW things, Paul. Just GW
for
things.
Sure. So, like, do people like buy the old ones? Do people like look for them, or?
So they do. The old warbands can be unfortunately very expensive. But the nice thing is that the legal seasons are all things you can find for MSRP at FLGSs and on Amazon.
Sure.
So if you want anything that's current, you're like straight up good to go.
What about are the models like dual purpose? Are they usable in Age of Sigmar as well?
Yes, and I think a lot of them actually have Warcry rules too.
Oh, interesting.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, like what'll happen is the White Dwarfs will come out, and the White Dwarfs will be like, "Here are the Warcry rules for X warband."
Oh yeah, GWA and getting you to buy the magazine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So and that I guess that was going to be one of my other questions for you, Chops. How? And I mean, I guess you've kind of answered it, but as far as it being on the, because I mean, it's on the current like GW seasons pattern or whatever, you know, way of going about and doing things, right? Do you feel that, I don't know, it that feels like such an oppressive cycle, right? 6 months in minis gaming is not a very long time. So it's like there's a lot of stuff coming out. Do you feel like with Underworlds being a smaller scale that makes it have less of an impact and might actually improve the feel of it?
I think it's fine. I think 6 months. So if you think about Magic the Gathering, let's just consider Magic the Gathering for a second. Magic the Gathering has 4 standard sets per year.
Right.
Well, you know what? Fuck it. Let's not talk about Magic. I'm a Flesh and Blood player. Let's talk about Flesh and Blood.
Okay, let's do it.
Flesh and Blood has 3 major set releases per year.
Right.
So we're talking about a major set release and an injection of somewhere between 190 and 260 cards into the card pool every 3 to 4 months.
Right. Which is crazy.
Right? It's right.
Which is why I can't play card games. Which is exactly why I can't play them.
But what I'll tell you is that it feels like an eternity when you're in it.
Right.
Like when you're going out and I'm going out and I'm playing Flesh and Blood once or twice a week. It feels like an eternity waiting for the next set. Like right now, the next set, Heavy Hitters, that has Brutes, Guardians, and Warriors. I'm like, can it be fucking the end of January right now? Because I need these cards.
Right.
Like slap my veins. Let's go. I need them. And so and this is all to say that I think 6 months is actually a pretty generous amount of time for the game to breathe.
Right.
As they release things and inject cards in, knowing that at 2 years, the cards cycle out. And so all you have to keep in your mind is what's legal. And then you're going to be looking at, at most, right. It's 32 cards per deck. Right. And if we think about it, it's 4 warbands and 4 universal things. So it's 32 times 8.
Right.
Per cycle. And even then, you're not necessarily paying attention to all 4 warbands or all 4 Universal Rivals decks unless someone's playing them against you. So like, I think it's actually a pretty relaxed pace, if I was to be perfectly honest.
And realistically, too, as far as like the core sets go, like if you're like, oh, I have no interest in any of those warbands and I can do without those Universal cards, you'd be like, well, I have the board from last year. That's still good. I don't need to buy this at all, right? Or am I?
Yeah. Okay. No, totally.
So
if nothing in the core box is appealing, yeah, I mean, if you don't even want the boards, yeah, you don't have to.
So they used to do, and I think this is right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the, like when the original set was done, right, the 2 warbands that were in that set, they then went and, released separately. Does that still happen or no?
Yes, it does. Like, you mean like without the cards?
Outside of like the big box, right? Then they kind of had their own like warband box, just like all the others.
I think they do. Okay. I don't pay attention to Age of Sigmar, so I don't necessarily know if they do or not. I would assume so.
Okay.
But then also maybe not, because GW is in the business of making money. And they kind of want people to buy them with cards that you want be damned.
Yeah.
Right. Pony up the $42, chump.
Right.
Like they want that money.
That's true.
So and realistically in GW terms, $42 for 4 to 7 models is like right on the level.
Yep.
So it doesn't really matter if it has cards or not. If people like the models, they're going to buy them. And like, as an example, I was just on Reddit and I saw that there's a box called Hexbane's Hunters.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
They're actually on the site right now. You
can
still buy them from the GW site.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Someone was like converting the Hexbane's Hunters models to be a Mordheim.
Oh, cool.
Thing, right. So like people buy these models for all sorts of reasons.
Sure.
Not just to play Underworlds. And I think GW knows that too, right? Like that's I think the players of this game are beneficiaries of the fact that like lots of people buy these models because they like the models.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's partially what they're feeding into, right? By making them at a reasonable price point. Quote unquote reasonable for GW, right?
It just happens though that these affordable models come with the best game they make. So I feel like it's kind of like GW's best kept secret that like it's unfathomable to me that not every AOS player is just playing this game.
Right.
Because like you don't have to schlep a bunch of shit with you to the shop. Like, wow, that was a lot of S's. I didn't even mean for that to be so alliterative. That was pretty good.
I like it. I like it, though. I mean, that's what I'm going to say. I got to schlep all this shit to the shop.
To the shop. You don't even have to do that. So what I take, I use one of the core boxes, the season boxes, and inside the season box, I have my decks, my boards, and my tokens.
Right.
And then I carry a really useful box kind of thing with the models in it. So I mean, if it's I can put the box in my backpack, and then I'm just carrying the box with the models, the magnetized models, and that's it.
Right.
That's all I take. It's less than I carry to play Flesh and Blood, if I'm being honest.
Huh.
So, because then I'm taking, my thing with my 12 decks, my fucking playmats, all my shit, like. I'm not taking very much with me when I go out to play this game, which is like I'm going to play a minis game and I don't have to carry a tote of terrain and like a giant bag full of models. If it's kind of freeing, to be honest.
Right. I can see that.
So yeah, fucking man, Warhammer Underworlds. Give the game a try. It's good.
Yeah. I mean, we certainly talked about it a whole lot. That's for sure.
I did. Also, if I'm going to say this now, I'm deeply sorry if Paul can't cut out the sound of my hot water heater for the first 20 minutes we were recording. I'm so sorry.
Well, I didn't hear it, so you should be good.
Oh, I hope so. I hope if you didn't hear it, that means that they won't hear it. Because like I was in here and I was like, oh my God, because we were like 10 minutes into recording or 5. It was like between 7 and 10 minutes into recording maybe that I was aware of it. And then as soon as I was aware of it, I was like, fuck, until it turned off.
Oh, it'll be all good. It'll be all good.
If you heard it, I'm so sorry.
Noise reduction is helpful.
Yeah, my final thoughts again for this game are, man, give it a try. I think that if you played it once and bounced off of it before Harrow Deep, I think Harrow Deep is when they made all of the changes to the release model and the rules.
Uh-huh.
So if you played it before Harrow Deep and you bounced off of it, really give it another look. Because I think since Harrow Deep, it's changed in meaningful ways that really improve the play experience, from like playing the game to collecting the game to buying the game.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that.
I like it. This is going to be, this is interesting. Because like I said, I keep going around and kind of poking at GW stuff and being like, if I didn't have to buy the rules, this would be something I would be interested in. So this might be a way to dabble. But, on the other hand, I'm so set on Conquest right now that I don't know. Maybe I don't even need to. But if
maybe you don't need to.
Yeah.
But boy, it's my side game.
Yeah.
And what a side game.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
Yeah, that's good though. I've settled so hard on a main game that I don't even want a side game. But
that's sick.
Yeah,
that's a good position
weird.
to be in.
It's very weird, but yeah, it'll work.
Well, I mean, I was there for the last 2 years, right? Like, I was like in full flesh and blood fervor.
Yep.
But like I was ready, I was ready for a side gig. And boy, this game really fits the bill for me.
Good.
But we'll talk about the other one, next time.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited to hear about that too.
Boy, howdy. Cyberpunk Combat Zone is a hell of a drug.
Although that might have to put off into the new year because we have to do our end of the year analysis.
Oh, that's true.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. So after end of the year analysis,
yep,
we'll talk about Cyberpunk, because and maybe I will have played 3 or 4 or 7 more games by then.
3 or 4 or 7 more games.
Good Lord, the game is really fucking fun, man.
That's good. Yeah, I mean the pictures that you sent look great.
It's so good.
Oh, and one last side note here. I have gotten very good at keeping track of my games on BG Stats.
Hell yeah. Also, yeah.
My last 4 games.
Not a sponsor. Not a sponsor. BG Stats, the best board gaming app ever. Go download that shit. They deserve your money, and you should pay them. It's real fucking good.
It's a pretty cool app. It tells you a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, most of my games happen on Wednesday.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Mine are. It's funny. It's Sunday and Thursday for me, which are the day I play with the kids and the day I play Flesh and Blood.
That's funny. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks to Static as a City for the music. Thanks to our patrons. And if you want, come join our Discord. It really is the best Discord in the world. And we look forward to seeing you there, and we'll see you the next time we get together and chat.
Bye.